I am so excited to have our dear friend and mentor, Matt Holt, on the episode with us. He was our sailing instructor when we were first getting into bigger boats on bigger water back in 2010. Anyway, he is the best sailing instructor in the world. He does all kinds of cool stuff on the water now that we'll get into. But him and his wife, Deb, live in the BVI, the British Virgin Islands. And we're so excited to have you on with us today, Matt. Welcome to What Could Go Right, a podcast about living boldly on and off the water. I'm Erik Orton.
I'm Emily Orton. On this podcast, we explore adventure, connection, and stepping into a more intentional life. And we don't just talk about it. We invite you to join us on guided sailing trips around the world.
And if you stick around to the end, you'll hear our sailing update where we share where we're going, when, and which trips still have space. And you'll hear a sailing takeaway from somebody who's already come on a trip with us. In 2014, we bootstrapped a year on a fixer-upper sailboat with our 5 kids. We wrote a book about it called 7 at Sea. That became a New York Times top 10 travel book.
Let's dive in.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you, Erik. Great to see you, Emily.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. I love when he was saying that you were like the best instructor because we literally tell every single person, no, you have to request Matt Holt. He has to be the one who's your teacher. I remember you showed Erik a lot about what it means to be a good captain, and it's thinking through things in advance, understanding what's going to need to happen, giving people a little notice so you can say it in a calm way. So you'll be about to run into a cliff and Matt will come and say, why don't we adjust this many degrees this way? Never panicking.
Actually, for our listeners, I just want to paint a little picture here and put you in context. So it was 2002, and Emily and I we'd been sailing in New York City, kind of getting more experience, and we took a roll of the dice and did what for us at the time was a very expensive trip down to the Virgin Islands to take sailing lessons. And you were our assigned skipper. We hadn't met you in advance, and we got on the boat. It was us and one other couple from New Jersey, and you're from New Jersey, is that right?
Born and raised in New Jersey. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So, and we lived across the river from New Jersey, and so kind of a reunion of sorts. We piled onto this monohull. It was, what is a 50-foot?
She was a Beneteau Oceanus 47 named Barnaby.
47. Okay,
That's
I knew
right.
it was close to 50 foot. And we got on and, you quickly stowed all the provisions because you'd done this 1,000 times and you knew where everything went. And the sun was setting and we were getting out there and we were going to go across the channel to Peter Island on anchor for the night. And we start pulling out of the slip, or we were getting ready to pull out of the slip, and you said, who wants to drive? And I was like, what? We're in this tight marina with a 47-foot boat, and he's going to let one of the students drive? And I raised my hand, and, and I'm at the helm, nervously going straight at the boat in front of us, and it's like being in a tight parking lot at Trader Joe's. I'm about to run into this other boat, and you're like, maybe just turn it a little bit to starboard. And I was like, okay. But you were just so gentle and calm with me that first day and the whole week, and just always poised and patient. And, we were relative beginners. And ever since then, I have aspired to instruct and guide new sailors in the way that Matt Holt does.
That's true.
Thanks so much for that.
You set the bar early on, and I still aspire to that. And so that our listeners know, we're sitting down with one of my heroes today.
That is true. And I know
you're very kind. You fill my cup with praise. Thank you for that.
Well, we had an instructor in New York when we were just on the little lasers doing our ASA 101, and we graduated that class, and you said, let's go try it by ourselves. So we went and found a place in Tom's River, and that was a complete disaster. And we had no real examples of how to be a poised captain. The kids were crying, hats were dropping overboard, sail ties were going overboard, running into pylons or whatever. We're like, let's never do this again, right? And you were shouting. It was just like, we hate this. So you kept trying, you got some more skill and that helped. But then, being able to have an example, like, okay, now I know what I'm aiming for. Yeah.
And honestly, Matt, we're out on trips now, and the highest praise that somebody can say, and I hear this often enough that I attribute this to you. They just say, you're just so calm. You're just so chill. And I just feel like I'm just channeling my inner Matt Holt. That's all I'm doing. So, okay.
It's so fabulous to hear all that. You're making me blush, but I really enjoy it too. It's always been one of my favorite parts is just watching people have that epiphany that this is magic. It's wonderful. Let's do more.
It's so true.
I'm glad that you passed that on as well. It's wonderful.
I try to carry on the legacy.
Yeah, I think it was after those classes was the first time that I actually got excited about the idea of living on a sailboat. First of all, I was terrified of the water and I didn't even get in the first few days. And finally I thought, what if this is crazy that we think we're going to live on a sailboat, but the second adult is unable to enter the water at any point for any reason. And so I hopped in and snorkeled, and that changed everything.
Yeah, that first snorkel with you at Peter Island, Great Harbor, was a big epiphany for Emily.
Yeah, huge.
I remember that portion of your book. I have it on the table here, 7 at Sea, and just the moment that you went in the water and said, "I don't think I'm ready to get out. I think this is my new favorite thing." And it's just it doesn't get any better than that. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that
It's
was
true.
amazing. I was like, "Okay, maybe we can do this. It could be
Yeah.
fun."
All right. So right before we hit record, you were talking about how you came to the BVI's in the summer, and you're from New Jersey. So now you've been living in the BVI for what, 18 years, 16 years?
No, it's almost 30 now, Eric. My goodness. I first stepped foot on Tortola on June 1st, 1998.
Okay.
That was my start, and I remember it. I remember sitting on the end of the dock at the marina where I still live, and just looking out into the Sir Francis Drake Channel, looking into the waters of the BVI. I didn't know where the BVI was before I took the job. I was brand new to the Caribbean, and it didn't take long for me to realize that I was somewhere very special. And yeah, almost 30 years later, 28 years later,
All right. So
it's
tell
been
us,
magic all the way along.
and your wife Deb, you met there, and you got
Yeah.
married, and she's British. So
Well,
tell
let him tell the story.
let's go back to 30, 28
Yeah,
years
how did
ago. You were in New Jersey, and you
Even
either
before the
applied for
BVI.
or got
Oh,
yeah,
invited
yeah.
yeah,
down.
how did it even happen?
Tell us.
I mean, I guess the story revolves around sailing and sailboats, and like we credit our parents with so much of our lives. So I owe this one to my mom and dad, because they themselves were raised on the water, around boats on lakes. We spent time on the coast, but as a New Jersey person, I would go down the shore, but I didn't really grow up down the shore. I grew up on the water, up in the
Okay.
mountains, on lakes in New York. And my dad had a little sailboat when he was a kid with his brothers, my uncles. And so when I came along, we got a little sailboat, a sunfish, a dinghy that is, 10, 12 feet long. And I was hooked from as young as I can remember, probably not long before or long after learning how to ride a bike. I was learning how to sail.
Wow.
And that took me through all my school years. I had summer jobs when I was at college, on boats, on the water. I think I realized I wanted to be a professional, or at least a commercial sailor. I realized that when I was in college, and I was working for a hotel on a lake that had a waterfront. And I knew the owner quite well, and he gave me a fabulous promotion from his dish room one afternoon out to his waterfront. And that's a fun story. If there's time for that,
There's
I'll tell you
time.
that story. By the time I was in college, I realized that I was gonna try and figure out a way to get paid to go sailing for as long as I could.
Yes.
I had a opportunity to take a summer job, 90 days, June 1st to September 1st, so I could plug it in around college. And by the end of that first summer, I was saying yes to a second summer. The second summer was 6 months long, and the third summer, I never left. So
Was
by
that first summer of the BVI? Was that your June 1?
Yeah, it was. I came down as a sailing instructor and as a captain for a youth program. It takes teenagers out onto 50-foot monohulls at the time, about 10 to 12 teenagers per boat. We'd sail on a flotilla of anywhere from 5 to 7 or 8 boats. And we were stationed on Tortola, but we would sail down the Eastern Caribbean archipelago. So, all told, I made it as far south as Grenada. I have
Oh,
never
wow.
sailed to Trinidad, but in between the Windward Islands, the Leewards, and the Virgin Islands, we ran this summer program. And it was amazing for the students, because they learn how to do all of the yacht going responsibilities, from sailing and navigating to cooking and cleaning for themselves. It was sort of like an Outward Bound or a
Mhm.
Knowles style leadership program. The students had a great time, but the instructors had a better time. I still fall back on some of my patience techniques or communication skills. If you were impacted by that, had a chance to sharpen or hone that edge working with a lot of young people, but teenagers. So they're still very alert to their surroundings, but learning a new task, and then the peer forming that comes with that. It was always about making the boat function for itself. And I definitely got that in my first couple of years in the Virgin Islands.
Amazing. So you'd come down you'd come down for long stretches, 3 to 6 months. And then by year three, you're hooked in the sense that like,
Yeah, after that first summer, really was looking for a way to make the summers last longer, and the company I worked for expanded to year-round charters, and so I found myself with them for 12 months of the year, and it was probably about 6 years later, I think it was 2004, that one of the bigger charter companies in the BVI approached me to start a sailing school for adults, what would effectively become the sailing school that you guys joined in 2010. So I launched that for them in 2004. And we were the ASA sailing school for about 4 years. And then we added an RYA training center to it, the Royal Yachting Association. So as an American, I had all my commercial licensing done in Britain and was able to teach both and run both training centers, which was great for me as a kid from New Jersey growing up and now living in the Virgin Islands, because my guests might be from Manhattan, but they might also be from England or even from Europe, from South America. So each week I had a sort of a journey of my own with people from all over the world that had picked the Virgin Islands, picked the BVI as the best place to learn how to sail. And
I
I
mean,
agree
and
with
it
them.
is pretty much.
was it, and still
It
is a
is.
great place to learn.
It's such a magnificent classroom. It just ticks all the boxes from the beginner sailing, but also because we're an archipelago and we're just plonked out in the middle of the Atlantic, you only have to go a couple of miles away from land to feel ocean energy. And you know that as well. I mean, your voyage on Fezziwig started in St. Martin, right?
That's right.
And so, once you're out of the lagoon and you come off of St. Martin, you're out in the ocean. And I was mesmerized by the place. I still am. It's still magic.
Well, I remember when we were on the boat with you and we were sailing in the Drake Channel, and then you said, "Hey, let's take you out, and so you can feel open ocean." And we went out. I can't remember which islands we cut between, but we go out off the shelf because for our listeners, the Drake Channel is a very shallow. It's kind of like a semi or an oval of islands that um, are create protected water, and then it's relatively shallow, a few hundred feet, and then you go out off the shelf and it drops off to a couple thousand.
I remember you saying, "Watch
The depth
the
gauge.
depth." It's like,
And and I remember you drove us out there. We sailed out there, and you could just feel the swell pick up. And I was like, "Oh, okay. This, if you want to get seasick, this is where you come."
It's amazing, isn't it? And you're absolutely right. Our little shelf, our little, I don't know, inland sea, Lake Sir Francis, this channel that we boat on is so protected. But just a few miles north or south of it are, the third and fourth deepest parts of the Atlantic. It's like a Grand Canyon of depth that falls off. And the wind and the waves are coming from Africa, thousands of miles of open sea to generate all that energy. And it wouldn't experience it. And then you're right back into the channel and it's calm again and there's a beach and you can anchor off it. It's,
It's safe. Yeah.
it's hard,
Actually, I
it's
have a
hard to
question for you.
describe.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Because I don't know if this is right, but this is how I understand it. The islands that are the British Virgin Islands and kind of what create the perimeter of the Drake Channel, is that the remains of a volcano? Am I?
Was it yeah, was
I don't know if it was a caldera or like an atoll like you'd see in the South Pacific, but we do have I'm doing this with my hands because I forget the word in geology, a subsidence.
Oh, where
a
tectonic
Yeah,
plates
so
crossing each
we're
other?
on where the Caribbean shelf meets the Atlantic plate, and I don't
Like a
think I
fault
have
line?
those words exactly right. Correct. So we have earthquakes in the Virgin Islands. We're on the Baths, which is a world famous national park in the Virgin Islands. Those big granite boulders would be what's left from part of that upwelling of is it metamorphic rock that becomes granite. So under the power of the Earth's crust and then erosion that would have carried it all away. So we are on a fault line, I guess,
Okay.
where the plate slides under. But as you move into the Windward Islands, there are still active volcanoes. There's hot springs. St. Lucia is the first place I think of that has
Uh-huh.
hot spring. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, so many of the islands, there is a volcanic crater at the top of the island that you can go up into. There's a new island that will be formed in the Caribbean, perhaps in our lifetimes, I think it's between the Grenadines and Grenada. It's called Kickham Jenny. And it is an area that is marked off because it is active just below the ocean surface.
Whoa, and it's
So
just slowly
it's a
forming.
very dynamic. Yeah,
Wow, that's
up in
kinda
the
cool, like,
Virgin
hey, there's
Islands.
a new Caribbean island on the way, just coming to
It,
a sailing trip near you.
it's such a tremendous area. The Virgin Islands might be, in terms of geology, might be a bit old in that regard. They're a little bit lower, they're drier, they have more cactus and agave. And then as you move into the Windward Islands, the peaks get much steeper. There's more of a
Mhm.
rainforest. There's fresh water, waterfalls, rivers. There's soils much darker and good for farming. And so, all within 100 miles of each other, you have these really different islands, not climates, but soils and compositions. And then all the different countries that are here. You visit France, you can visit Spain, you can visit England, you can visit the Netherlands, and underpinning it all is that African origins of the region that are just full of so much music and culture, and it's magic. I can't believe that I found myself living in the Caribbean. If you'd asked that little boy out in a sunfish, going back and forth on a lake, if he was going to live, in the Caribbean Sea, I wouldn't have believed it.
Well,
Maybe it's a good time to go back and figure out how you got from being a dishwasher to being on the waterfront. Since
yeah,
we were talking about that little
I,
boy.
tell us
Yeah.
that story, and then
I
I wanna pick up where we left off, where you're opening a sailing school, but let's go back to that,
sure.
move from the
I
from the back kitchen.
I guess I know we center around sailing, and there's so many different types of sailing, or so many different ways that somebody can sail. I didn't grow up racing in a yacht club. I hadn't really ever thought that I was going to be like the ocean circumnavigator all by myself. For me, it's always been quite social. The best part of sailing for me was going out with friends or with others and going for a boat ride. And my mother at one point showed me, as she was kind of organizing one of our closets, came across an old yearbook of mine from when I was a child, middle school. And people had written in the margins, "Thanks so much for teaching us how to sail." I must have been like, I don't know, 13 years old. And so I was
What?
kind of doing it already, but I hadn't matured into it yet. I had a summer job at a resort. I was under the age of 18, and I had, you know, always worked in the summers. Another thing that I credit my parents with, from our teenage years, we would get summer jobs. It was a tourist area, so we would work in restaurants or kitchens. I worked on a fuel dock at a marina, and I had a job as a dishwasher and as a lunchtime waiter. And I was too young to drive myself by car because I didn't have a driver's license, and I was a little too old and too proud to ask my mom or dad to drive me to work. And it was it was quite a long bike ride to get there, but it was a really short sail. It was just across the bay. So I would take my little sunfish over to this resort and just pull it up on the side and then go to work.
You're
And
commuting via sailboat. I love it.
some days there wasn't enough wind, so I'd kind of row it, but there was always wind for the ride home. And one afternoon, as I remember it, because again, I think I was maybe 16, 15 or 16, and the owner of the resort, a wonderful man who was helped me solidify that teaching behavior out on the water, came into the dish room and he said, "Are you the young man that's been bringing a sailboat to my resort every day and leaving it on my beach?" And the first thing I thought was,
I'm in
I'm about to
trouble.
get fired. I'm gonna go tell my dad I got fired from washing dishes. And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "Well, I have a problem with that because my hotel guests keep asking to use it. And I don't have a little sailboat, but I've got three big ones." And after we talked for a couple minutes, he asked me, he said, "Where do you live?" And I just kind of pointed out the window and I said, "Around the point. I live in that bay." And he said, "Do you know the lake well?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Do you have a favorite fishing spot?" Or he said, "Do you like fishing?" And I said, "Oh, yes, sir." And he said, "What's your favorite fishing spot?" And I said, I can't tell you that." He said, "That's a good answer." And he said, "Well, tomorrow when you come to work, I don't want to see that sailboat on my beach anymore because It wouldn't be appropriate for my guests to take it out. It's not mine. I'll make you a space in the boathouse. And why don't you wear a ball cap? Because it's quite sunny out there. And I became his deckhand. And he was quite old at the time. I'd help rig up the boat, and then I would, pull the lines and push things around and help people sit down and help them through tacks, and just fell in love with it. And I think by the end of that summer, I was starting to take guests out under his supervision. And within the next year, as soon as I was old enough to be commercial, on my 18th birthday, in fact, I got my New York State license and started driving water ski boat and island shuttles and ferries and his sailboats. He had these beautiful handmade sailboats. And that was it. I was absolutely hooked. And I stayed there until I had the Caribbean summer uh, that was challenging it. And I remember, saying, I can't come back this summer. I've got this job in the Caribbean, but I'll see you in the fall. I would help them pack the boats away in the fall after the season, and I'd help them take out and rig everything in the spring, and then go to the Caribbean and then come back. And it was just magic. My career had started, and I don't think I'd even realized that it was my career. It was too much fun. It was wonderful.
Well, that's the best way, right? If you don't even realize
Yeah.
you're working, but you're
It
good.
it is. It's always been such a fun. I mean, I guess it's that part of sailing that I was gravitated to. I don't really have a competitive streak, so it wasn't about the starting line and getting the trophy. And I do go out sailing by myself, but I wouldn't say that that was my passion either. We used to call it at the hotel. We used to call it spending time under the boom. The boom being the principal spar overhead that everybody knows to stay
Keep
clear
clear
of.
of.
But it's also where the conversations happen. It's where you're sitting in the cockpit. It's where meals might be taken, or it's where stories are shared. And so for me, it was, time under the boom was just as rewarding as any other aspect of sailing. So I found myself in the Virgin Islands kind of continuing a very social part of sailboating that I quite liked as a young person.
Well, you're so good with people, Matt, and obviously our short week, we got to experience that full time, but I can tell you care about people, and the fact that you started out taking out these teenage groups
Or
and
taking out these resort
yeah,
guests and
and
then yeah.
and like you, I'm not terribly competitive. I'm not really a racer,
Well, I think
and
you've only been in one race for, like, the last mooring ball.
I did
Right.
race a boat out to Bermuda, but oh yeah, she can tell you about
Yeah.
getting the last mooring ball at Cooper Island, but that's
I am from New Jersey, so I know what it's like getting the last parking spot. There can
Yeah,
definitely
that was
there's
really
there's a switch in there that kind of happens, and I get that. Yeah,
they were
there was a yacht club where I grew up. We weren't members of the yacht club, but I was racing, or I was sailing on the lake, daily, and so I would sometimes get snuck onto a yacht club boat because I pretty much knew what to do. I didn't have any tactical contributions, but if I was told to do something with a line, or go up on, they would put me on the bow sometimes because I was young and lightweight. And I had sticky feet, so I could do the spinnaker for them. But it wasn't as much fun as taking the resort guests out and telling them stories, or putting a child on the tiller, or a parent, and enjoying the company.
That's true, and you know what? That's actually what we love to do as well, like
yeah.
and you said something I hadn't heard this phrase before, but you talked about going out with the teenagers, and you talked about the peer forming, and
Yeah.
that is, I think, how I would talk about it is the team building or whatever, but it is pretty amazing when you get to spend all day, every day doing something that in most cases for our guests is new to them and that they get to cook for each other and kind of help each other along and share that experience together that we put every one of our groups on a WhatsApp thread and so
Mm.
many of those, like, continue to pop. We'll have messages coming up every week like, "Oh, I'm here now," or, "Oh, I just got ASA certified," or, we even had one situation where a woman was on the trip with you, and there was some, like, natural disaster where she lived, and other people on the group were saying, "You can come stay at my house until you know if your home is safe again," like, that peer forming or that friendship forming, that happens when you
It's right.
have, like, taken care of each other for a week in a new situation like this.
For me, it carries with me into my adult life, and it actually informed a later job that I had after our hurricanes down here. But that notion of becoming a crew, like we're not family, we're not kin, but we're more than friends. We've shared something together that bonds us in a way. And there's that collective, they always say that you toast the boat, so here's to Fezziwig or here's to Barnaby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's really a toast to this shared experience. And I loved, especially with teenagers that are in that pure forming moment where you can deconstruct it a bit and use sailing as a tool to reassemble it. You might have the high school star athlete on board, maybe the quarterback of the football team. And so that comes with, a conception when you're in school, but there's no football field on a sailboat. But here's some heavy ropes, and everything is about timing and sequence. And then you might have someone else who would be in advanced calculus, taking AP courses. And so it's not a math test, but navigation is very specific and detailed, and there's quite a bit of calculation. And all of a sudden you're able to take people that maybe wouldn't sit at the same lunch table and give them roles on a boat where they depend on each other,
Mm-hmm.
where they actually need each other to get out of the harbor and to get to the next one safely. And it was wonderful to see those groups at the end of, what was maybe 3 weeks at sea, that had perhaps never connected with someone like that in their typical home environments. And all of a sudden they've bonded as a crew doing something that was 100% out of everyone's comfort zone. So whether or not you're the star athlete or the brightest in the math class, like being out at sea, anybody could be uncomfortable in that moment, maybe seasick, maybe not sure of what the boat's doing. And so it's an equalizer. As long as you can then put it all back together in a way that gets everyone safely and happily to the next destination, then you've really struck magic.
Everybody starts as a beginner.
Well,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to say something about this comment you're making about crew, and then I want to double back because we want to hear the story about how you met Deb. And so the Artemis mission that just went out around the moon. I forget the name of the female astronaut, but she was asked on an interview kind of to describe part of their experience, and she talks about she's trying to define what a crew is, and that a crew, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's kind of like you have a mission, you have a purpose, and like you said, you're not family, you're not related, but you're more than friends, and you're
Mhm.
on a journey together to accomplish something together. And she's talking about how her crew of the 4 astronauts that went around the moon on the Artemis 2 mission, that they bonded in a way that cannot be replicated by anybody
Yeah,
else because they went through that together. And she also made this really beautiful observation. I think that she said, looking back at planet Earth and seeing it in its isolation in space, she said, us here on Earth, we're actually a crew. Everybody on planet Earth, you have to be on a vessel. You have to be you have to be kind of in a contained space, and you're on a journey. You're trying to accomplish something together. And she was saying, Earth is a vessel, and we're all on board, and maybe we're not always clear or unified on what we're trying to accomplish, but we are, here on Earth, we're out
yeah,
in a sea of space on a journey, and
so
we
true.
are crew. And so anyway, I just love that you're making that distinction that a crew is something totally unique from a family or a graduating class or a business team. It's its own thing. Okay,
Absolutely.
so now you're in the Virgin Islands, you're living there full time, you're doing all kinds of cool sailing jobs. And when we met you, you were, I don't know how newly married you
Yeah.
were, but I remember we stopped off in Trellis Bay. There was kind of a rainy day. And you're like, well, let's just go do practice picking up mooring balls. And it just happened to be right by where your wife worked, and you could easily shuttle to shore, and we could get a quick hello and visit.
Obviously, we all wanted to meet her
We wanted
because, like, you're this famous celebrity to us now, and we were like, see
see the
this
celebrity's wife.
this amazing woman.
So yeah, tell us
So
how
full disclosure, full disclosure, on most of my sailing trips, we would spend a wonderful afternoon or evening in Trellis Bay, picking up mooring buoys or practicing anchoring. And it was also so that I could, quickly sprint to shore and say hi to my girlfriend for many years and happily now my wife. I met
you're
Debbie.
you're a good boyfriend and now a good husband.
Plus, we did need the
Yes,
practice. I mean,
is objectively, it's an unsung. The harbor that we're referring to is called Trellis Bay on the east end of Tortola. Is always going to be one of my favorites, and there's certainly an emotional connection there. Having met my wife,
A beautiful
but
spot.
it's also a great place to. All of the British Virgin Islands is an exquisite classroom. It's just there's so many places to teach. Debbie got here in 2004 or 2005, so I had already been here for a few years, 6 or so years, and I was a captain. I was a charter captain. So the one island I visited least amongst the British Virgin Islands was Tortola. I would come in on a Saturday, right to the charter base, turn the yacht around, get it ready, welcome my new guests aboard, and then I was out again. And so from a social standpoint, I wasn't really that connected to the island of Tortola initially.
It's hard to pick up girls with a schedule like that.
Well, like you're kind of like every once in a while you might have a night out or a day off and you kind of find yourself in a social circle. So I desperately want to say it was love at first sight, and she is the most beautiful woman I've ever met, but the honest truth is it was love at first laugh. My wife has a laugh that it's infectious, and it is stronger than any other sounds that might be in the area. And we found ourselves, we had met once in a large group, but without enough time to really connect. And then I went out to sea again for weeks or maybe months. And we were out one evening, myself and some other colleagues, and it was a crowded place. It was a restaurant in the town, in Road Town. And I heard this laugh, and I just said to my buddy next to me, I said, I have to see who that is. I have to find out who that laugh is. And of course you kind of echolocate and go over to where you think the laugh is, but they're having a lovely evening of their own. So the laugh has now migrated somewhere else. And by the end of the evening, I found myself standing next to the author of the laugh, and it was Debbie.
Yes.
And that was Cupid's arrow.
Uh,
And it wasn't long before, I found that she was working in Trellis, and, we started a courtship, from a sailor and a potter. She's a master ceramicist. She makes beautiful ceramics, pottery right on the beach in Trellis Bay. And there were so many times when we were doing that mooring ball practice, and I would hear her laughing with her workmates on the shore and kind of, all right, I think we finished the lessons for today. Why don't we all go ashore?
I think you've nailed it, guys. Let's get out of here.
let's go see the world's biggest hammock.
Let's go. Yeah, exactly. Let me go show you these wonderful sights on Trellis Bay.
Yes.
We were married in 2010. So we met in 2005. We were married in 2010. It's just another
Oh,
layer
was
of the
newly
Virgin
married.
Islands.
You were
Yeah.
newlyweds and we met her.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I'm trying to remember the exact year that we sailed, if it was 2010, I would be like, we were married in February. You guys came, I think, in the summer.
Yeah.
It was
It
August
was
or
so
July.
it could very well have been, 5 or 6 months that we were married, or if it was maybe 2011 or 2012. I don't remember exactly what year, but yeah, our journey down here, we met on this, impossibly small place. She's from just outside of Liverpool. I'm from just outside of New York City. She's from a place that's sort of like the New Jersey to Liverpool, like you're close to the city, but can't say Manhattan.
Yeah.
And so we were connected to those urban centers, but we grew up near them. And yeah, we fell in love, and we've made it work. I was a captain until 2013, 14, and the company that I had started the sailing school with had given me additional responsibilities, and I found myself in operations. So I became like a customer service manager, and then an operations manager, base manager, and had hired instructors to kind of, to do it the way they do it. But also I was hoping to weave a little bit of Matt into the training center so that we could duplicate our success. And so I was coming home at night for the last few years of that.
You were off the water a little bit more.
Yeah, and I do look back on it. I mean, it's, all winter down here in the Virgin Islands. You can't help but look out on the channel and see boats everywhere. The harbors are full, the anchorages, the channel has boats everywhere. I do miss it a bit, but it's a chapter in the book, and I loved it, and now I'm just as happy and maybe even happier living on land. Yeah.
So, okay, first of all, thank you for sharing that beautiful and delightful story about how you met. And we've met Deb obviously, and
Yeah.
we were fortunate to have dinner with the two of you. I guess was it 2 seasons ago we were down there.
I think so.
But anyway,
Yes.
and she now owns the pottery. She bought that part of the business, and you shared a lot of hurricane stories with us because the cards in the whole
It,
island got shuffled during the hurricanes in 2017.
Yeah, so when we came in 2010, I remember you saying to us, "Oh, me and Deb are thinking we want to maybe run a resort like that where you started," the story
yeah.
you already told us, and you were so great. Obviously, you're like, "And here's how to cut a mango," and you would, like, serve things up, and it was just lovely. You had that great customer service part, and you said, "Yeah, that's our vision is that we wanna do this," this not a resort, but it was gonna be, like, I think a bed and breakfast or something is what you were talking about at the time, and then when we talked to you a couple years ago, we're like, "Well, you're still here, so, what happened?" And you had a story about kind of deciding that the BVI
Yeah.
is home. Yeah.
It's worth sharing it again
Yeah.
for your listeners.
Please.
I the thing that drew me to the Virgin Islands was boats and sailing, but it's not why I stayed. I'd like to think it's not why I stayed. I discovered over those years, and really right from day one of the first people that I met in the company was a Virgin Islander, a captain, a descendant of other sailors and captains, and he showed me so much about not just about maritime in the Caribbean, but about the pride and the heritage of the people of the Virgin Islands. And I found myself falling in love with the place, not just the sailing destination, but the place, the people of the Virgin Islands. In 2017, we had two back-to-back Category 5 hurricanes in September of that year. My wife and I was no longer a sea captain, but I was still doing charters. I was the boss or the principal of the school, and I was a base manager, but I would also do a week here and there. If somebody was sick or if we were overbooked or if I just needed a week out on the water. So it wasn't the thing that I did every week, but it was still very much a part of my life in the Virgin Islands. And I came back from my last charter at the end of August, helped the company de-rig the boats, and we had already had a forecast of a storm, and it's the summertime. It wasn't our first hurricane, but as it happened, Hurricane Irma was first, and then Hurricane Maria came about 2 weeks later with a small one in between. And it devastated the Virgin Islands and a number of other islands in the Caribbean. Um, and the specifics are hard to quantify. They've said, 90% of the boats were destroyed. 80% of the buildings were in some way damaged or destroyed. I think that's probably accurate. I'm a lifelong sailor and I'll never fully fathom the physics of the day. But long story short, my wife and I, we survived. We didn't have to run for our lives, but in the eye of the storm, we walked quickly to a better location. So we abandoned ship. We left our house and went into a bigger concrete structure. And then the recovery started. The hurricane was terrifying, but the recovery was this long dig. And there was a moment, in the first few weeks afterwards, I lost my job because the charter company was destroyed. My wife effectively lost her job because the business didn't open for some time. And we kind of said to each other, like, if there was ever a chance, if there was ever a moment where maybe we should close our Caribbean chapter and move away, this would be the right time. And as soon as we ventilated it, we both kind of said, well, what if we stay? What if we can be part of the solution? What if we can help, put it all back together? And I think that was the moment where both of us, more than any other time, really fell in love with where we lived and watched this small community, which I think sometimes to go back to the Artemis mission, we forget sometimes that the world isn't as big as we think it is, and maybe it should be smaller than we manage it. Communities, keeping an eye on your neighbors, knowing what's going on around you in a positive way is really valuable. And it's a magical community down here. I mean, there was months where we had to help each other get through stuff, and we did. And so that storm kind of forged our existence down here and made us commit to staying. And then the shiny things started to come out of that. I guess the fruits of our labor, of everyone's labor. Debbie, in the end, was able to take over the studio as her own business, sort of bought out the damaged components and put her own sign up over the door and went from an employee to a sole proprietor. I moved away from the tourism sector directly and was hired by the government as a consultant to help design a maritime training program that was built for Virgin Islanders to participate in that recovery. So there was one for construction, home trades, carpentry, plumbing, electrical, masonry, and then there was one for maritime trades. And I was hired to design and help deliver that maritime trade program. And we hit a home run with it. It was so rewarding to sit in a classroom, not with guests doing ASA and not with teenagers on an outward bound program, but with college age students that are sort of at that pre-employment phase in their life, 18 years of age, and layer on them the skills that are needed for the industry. And it was such another wonderful chapter that pulled me deeper into the Virgin Islands and made me fall in love with it even more. I think we had 80 students that took the course, and it included a 2-week apprenticeship in the marine sector. And of the 80 students that took the course over a few years, 75 of them finished their apprenticeship and got hired into jobs. A couple of them
Wow.
didn't stay with Marine, and that's okay. But the vast majority of them are captains or certified technicians, or they've gotten into management and administration, and they have an ownership stake in the marine
Wow.
tourism product. And it was fabulous to have members of the Virgin Islands community, young men and women calling me Teach, which is a sort of a beloved reference in the Caribbean. A teacher, if somebody shouts, "Hey, Teach," you've had an impact on them. And so that really filled my cup. I loved those years and look back on that quite fondly still.
Well, you are such a teacher. I mean, we know you as a teacher, and just to hear all the little episodes and chapters throughout your life where you've been teaching and
Thanks for
introducing.
teaching us how to sail in middle school.
Yeah,
I
how to
I
sail in
I
yeah, your yearbook, and then on the lake, at the resort, and these teenagers who get to go down the Caribbean chain with you, and all the way up to these young men and women that you're talking about now. And so yeah, bring us current. And as we wrap up, just what's Matt Holt doing now? I know you started. Well, I don't want to say what you. I'll let you
Say
say
what
it,
you
but
No, it's
want.
it's so I turned 50 this year, which I guess is a milestone birthday. I don't
congratulations.
really calculate. Thanks. I count my blessings more than celebrate the miles run, but I'm still doing consulting, maritime consulting, but I guess I've become a bit selective about it. So I'm split between a couple of different positions. I'm self-employed and I do property management for our villa, which is wonderful. It is much smaller than working for a charter company, but it also gives me a lot of time to choose consulting contracts. So I can pick and choose how and where I might have a lesson or a program or a product that fits with an employer or with a youth program. In the summertime, there's a lot of youth programs in the Virgin Islands, and then during the year there's a lot of commercial need for employers to train up their staff. I've also been helping my wife at the pottery quite a bit, and
Yeah.
what it's wonderful. What we've decided is, this moment, maybe we have 10, 15 years of work time left, and so we're kind of leveraging that life that we've dug for ourselves in the Virgin Islands, and she helps me with her business. I'm sorry, she helps me with my business. I help her with her business. We kind of work together on our businesses. There's that dilemma, and I'm sure you know what I mean when I say this. If you're self-employed, you find yourself either working in your business or working on your business. And sometimes the daily tasks and duties find you just working in your business and you're not really thinking over here. So Debbie and I are helping us or we're helping each other on our businesses, and it's wonderful. It really is. If I go sailing now, it's just for pleasure. So my commercial license has expired, and I didn't choose to renew it. Happily, I feel like I had done that, and I'm no longer a licensed instructor. But I've got a little sailboat at the end of the dock, so in a way, I'm back to that teenage time in my life where it's like, I've got a little sailboat. Do you want to go for a sail? Come on, it'll be fun. And I quite enjoy that. I call it a tack and back. At the end of the day, at about 4 o'clock, I'll leave the dock. It's just a little keel boat, like you would have done at ASA 101. But it's quite old. It was built in 1959, and I leave the harbor and I sail out until the last ferry goes to Virgin Gorda, which gives me about 30 minutes to get back to the dock before the sun sets. So it's like an hour a day of no destination, just going for a tack and back. And I'll bring a friend, or my wife and I'll go out. Maybe we'll bring the dog. Maybe I'll go by myself, and it's perfect. It's just the right amount to recharge for the next day.
I love that. I think about your tack and back often, and just the idea of getting out there for the joy of it and sailing over to Cooper Island for a burger or whatever you do. And,
Yes.
and then just coming back and parking your boat in front of your house and, walking up the dock and being home. Hey, honey, I'm home.
It's exactly that. And the dog will come down. The dog can hear the sail luffing as I come up on final approach. And so he'll come out the dock, and that'll alert my wife that I'm, tying up, and maybe we'll have a cocktail on the dock, or we'll just, get tucked into making dinner. But I still get that same pleasure that I did as a kid, that sense of, I don't know, commanding something, but also being subject to it. I just think the sailboat is a marvelous invention that is engineering and art combined. And I don't quite have the right words for it, but it's just this magical craft. It's a magical.
Well, Matt, I think you're a lot like a sailboat. Like a sailboat is a little bit art and a little bit engineering. And I think you're such a competent, capable teacher and administrator and manager, but also a little bit of a poet, and and sort of like you just have such a philanthropist heart. And anyway, so I think for me, you're sort of representative of the best of what a boat can be as well, that it's a little bit of both worlds.
Yeah, and of teaching too, because I always felt like it was basically you saying, "Can I share something that I love with you?" You just had have so much love for that it was like almost like Deb's laugh, right? Like it's just infectious. You're like, "Oh, yes. I want to have more of that." It was just wonderful. I think our listeners are going to be even more drawn to the British Virgin Islands, having your personal stories, and they've gotten a geography lesson, they've gotten some history, they've gotten some meteorology, like just your love in all of the parts. And I think it's going to help them feel like they're closer to that. And also just recognizing the personal story and the people of the British Virgin Islands. And I think they'll slow down and pay a little closer attention when they get to come next time.
So Matt, before we put a ribbon on this, is there anything else that you want to share? First of all, I think we should put a link to your villa in there in case anyone's looking for a great place to stay.
For sure. We
in the Virgin
definitely will.
Islands. We visited it. It's beautiful. You guys have done a fabulous job making.
It's in the background right now.
You have a
Bless
beautiful
your heart.
view over. I know you're overlooking the Wyndham Resort, which it's not Josiah's Bay.
It's just east of that, Lambert Estate. Yeah,
Lambert
Bay.
Estate. Yeah. So anyway, it's a beautiful place. So if people are needing a wonderful place to rest and lay their head in Tortola. Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
I just wanted to return the compliments and the praise. I think it is so magical, so wonderful that you guys as a family embarked on a liveaboard experience. I have loved reading your book and meeting the children, that you continue to take people out on the water and share it with them. I've always thought that a love for sailing can be contagious, and it's really nice to see that you have taken that part of learning how to sail a boat and just amplified it to so many others and helped them to see it. It's a very hard thing to explain until you've done it. And um, I'm so delighted that it's still very much a part of your lives.
Well, your influence has rippled out into the world to some extent through us.
I'm so delighted that it's not going to be like through us, like it'll be through you on this podcast.
Yeah,
and we can introduce them directly to you.
We're so happy
It's very
for
kind.
our friends and listeners to get to meet you, and certainly Our podcast is called What Could Go Right. And I have to say that definitely meeting you and sailing with you and meeting Deb, that has been one of the things that has gone right for the Orton family.
And I think the stories that you told would cause people to ask that question as well, because, that resort owner came into the back dish room and you thought everything was about to go wrong. And actually, it was the opposite. So we just want everybody to keep asking that, like, what could go right?
Hey there, before we wrap up, I want to give you the sailing update. I'm going to tell you what's going on with 2027, and then at the end, I'll give you a few updates on what's happening this year if you want to jump on a trip. Basically, 2027, we're going to go to the BVI in January, or sold out. In March, we're going to be in the Bahamas, Exumas or the Abacos, so stay tuned for that. April, we'll be in Mexico, Sea of Cortez. May, we're going to be in Bora Bora, so if you want to fly to Tahiti, French Polynesia, and sail Bora Bora, we're going to be going there for the first time in a long, long time. So that's going to be a fun trip. June, we're in Italy. July, we're in Greece. August, we're in Croatia. September, we're in Italy. We're going to go to a second trip to Greece in September as well. And then November of 2027, we're back in the British Virgin Islands, and December, we're in the Bahamas again. So that's the lowdown for 2027. If you want to come sailing with us this year, here's what we have. A Croatia boat, August 1 through 8, sold out. Then in Norway, September 3rd through the 10th, we have a spot for one solo female traveler. So that's going to be September 3rd through 10. It's going to be an epic trip. I'm super excited about that one. Italy in September is sold out. Mexico in October is sold out. Bahamas, November 9th through the 14th, we have a spot for one solo traveler. And then in December 7th through 12th, British Virgin Islands is sold out. If you want to learn more about any of these trips or get the details, visit theawesomefactory.nyc/sailing. Click to sign up for a time to talk with our team, with me, and we'll get your questions answered and hopefully welcome you aboard.
We can talk about trips all day, but it's more fun to hear from someone who's been aboard. Here's a recent guest takeaway.
A Greek sailing trip has been on my list for 10 years. And I Googled first to find which one. And Awesome Factory showed up somehow, some way. Started following, learned about Erik, and just thought, this is the one.